This broadcast is best observed in video form on YouTube.
Oh, check out this spoiler from Duskmourn. It's an enchantment room that when you...
James, I've literally just finished adding the cards I wanted from Bloomburrow into my decks, okay? Talk to someone else about this. I need to get ready. The Space Commanders are expecting our transmission soon.
All right. Oh, Mystery Booster 2 just got spoiled. Oh, there's a couple of white border frames.
How much is a box?
Oh, no, you can only get it if you go to a convention or if you buy the Festival in a Box Secret Lair.
Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast, where every month we analyze the state of the format and transmit our thoughts to the Space Commanders in the deep depths of the galaxy via the monthly Meteor.
That's right. We're going to give our opinions and thoughts on the current news, controversy, updates, bans, and of course, previews for Commander. And this month, we're going to beam to the Meteor.
More Duskmourn previews we're hyped for.
A new rules committee for cEDH.
And some Silver Border Acorn guidelines for fun, including a look at Mystery Booster 2.
And this monthly Meteor is proudly brought to you by the power of our amazing Patreons. Via Patreon, you can receive cool perks from Get Commanded, including seeing this brand new series completely unedited.
And if you want more of us talking about Commander, you can check out our audio podcast right here on this YouTube channel or wherever you find good podcasts.
All right, to the alerts!
Duskmourn previews. We've already done some of the previews for this set in the last monthly Meteor, actually, a little while back. There was far fewer cards that have been spoiled at that point, but the entire
a lot less
set...
to choose from.
Yes, but the entire set is breaking through the walls of the house on the 27th of September, which is very soon now.
And yeah, there's been quite a few cards previewed by different content creators and websites and medias and all that kind of stuff. The whole set, as of time of recording, hasn't been released for us, but so far, we've got some more cards that are sticking out for us.
Definitely.
The first one that I wanted to talk about is a blue card.
Oh,
Shocking
shocker.
no one.
Shocker.
It's got white in it as well.
Okay.
So
Some change.
It's
New.
a little bit of an addition. It's Nico, Light of Hope.
Oh, Nico's back.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And bringing back shards with them as well, which is really cool. So it's a human wizard 3/4, so lost their spark. Sad times. When Nico enters the battlefield, should say, when Nico enters, create 2 shard tokens. Now, these are different types of clues, essentially. These are enchantments with pay 2, sacrifice this enchantment, scry 1, then draw a card.
They're better than clues, in other words, in every way.
Way better than clues, but we've only ever really seen them from Nico. So maybe
I think only Nico makes shards, yeah.
It'd be cool to see other cards in this set make shards. That might be really
sometime.
cool.
Yeah.
They also have the ability, pay 2, tap, exile target non-legendary creature you control. Shards you control become copies of it until the beginning of your next end step. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's controller at the beginning of the next end step.
Okay.
This
So it's
card
like a
is weird.
weird... So it flickers it, or it blinks it, right?
Blinks it, yeah,
Takes
slow.
it out, brings it back in the end step. But while it's gone, your shards become the thing that you blink.
I love the idea of this going in any like flicker or blink deck. I've got a
Namely,
Sally Sparrow deck.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is great in your Sally Sparrow deck.
You can flicker Nico, and if you're already in a flicker build, flickering Nico is already good because you get more card advantage from the shards. And then on top of that, you have that wild ability to turn all of your shards into something for that turn. Anything with a good attack trigger feels really, really good here.
Yeah.
You can also do it just to... can you do it at instant speed? You can do it at instant speed. You can
Sweet.
use this as a protection piece.
That's awesome.
That feels really good.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
My first one that I've got picked out here is a much less playable card, but someone will find a use for it. Clockwork Percussionist is
I haven't seen this card.
1/1 artifact creature monkey toy. It's got haste, and when it dies, exile the top card of your library. You may play it until the end of your next turn. So I just kind of like this I think there's an increasingly large number of these artifact recycling decks.
Well, I mean,
Stuff like
Duretti's
a big one.
Yeah.
Osgear even is the kind of deck that
That's a
might want
good
this.
one.
Anything that kind of wants to specifically sack an artifact to bring something else back. Like any deck that plays Trading Post, for instance.
Or
I
Trash
think.
for Treasure.
Trash for Treasure,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. On a 1/1 mana 1/1 haste body, impulse draw whenever you sack it. I don't know. I think it's a decent rate.
I think you have to be giving this repeated value. Like
You need to be getting it back. I think if you play Scrap Trawler, if you're a Scrap Trawler deck, you love this card.
Yeah,
sure.
if you're a scrap trawler deck, this card will definitely be a piece of value that can get you a lot of cards.
I think it'd be cool.
Yeah.
I'm hyped to see someone make good use of it.
My next card is another blue card. Shocking nobody.
What?
And it's more card draw. Shocking more than nobody. 2 times nobodies. It's Enduring Curiosity for 2 blue and a blue.
This is the cycle, right? They've made
there a cycle?
There's a cycle of enduring creatures.
Sure,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
It's an enchantment creature, and it's a cat Glimmer. And I've heard that Glimmer is also going to have
It's a big part of the
creature
set.
type.
Yeah.
It's got Flash. It's a 4/3. And whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So it's a reconnaissance mission, effectively. It's a Flash reconnaissance mission on a body. That's great until you read the second line of or the third line of text, technically, and it gets even better. When Enduring Curiosity dies, if it was a creature, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. It's an enchantment. And then reminder text says it's not a creature.
So in other words, yeah, you kind of get double value from this. You get this great enchantment effect, usually, on a creature, and then when it dies, you just get the enchantment effect anyway. So yeah, this is actually part of a cycle. There's an enduring in every color.
Okay, I'm going to bring them up on screen so you can see them all.
Look at them all. There they all are. But yes, there's one in every color, and they all kind of represent an enchantment that has already been printed in that color. So this is Enduring Curiosity because it's kind of
curiosity.
I mean, you're more like Enduring Reconnaissance, really.
Enduring Reconnaissance mission.
Yeah, there's basically like there's a black one that's like whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. I think.
Oh, cool.
So there's like an enduring whatever that effect is, but in black.
I just really like cards that protecting themselves, but not in a way of giving themselves hexproof or giving themselves
ward. We've seen overused recently.
The also wild thing about this is if in any way you can flicker the enchantment non-creature version of it, it should re-enter as a creature again.
Yeah, a Teferi's Time Twist, for instance, like flickers are permanent, so you could flicker the enchantment and it's not going to remember that it's an enchantment anymore. It's going to go back to being an enchantment creature.
So this is also going in my Sally Sparrow deck is what I'm saying, and I think it'll be pretty strong in there too. Duskmourn, surprisingly good for my Sally Sparrow Blink deck.
Who would have thunk it? My second pick is Drag to the Roots. This is a 4-mana instant for 2 black-green. It has Delirium. Spell costs 2 less to cast as long as there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard. Destroy target non-land permanent. So, the card that immediately springs to mind for me is a card I play in my Barbala Saga deck, Mortality Spear from Strixhaven. This is exactly the same text, except rather than Delirium, if you gained 3 or more life this turn, it costs 2 less. So, they've done this before, like high-cost removal spells that can be hyper-efficient removal spells if you meet a criteria. I think Delirium can be quite tough to hit, unless you're milling yourself quite intentionally.
And also, you do have to be milling specific set of creature types.
Yeah.
Like if you're in a Marin deck, it's very unlikely that you're going to have artifacts and enchantments and instants and sorceries. You're probably a full creature build.
My Marin deck has 43 creatures in it. So it's very easy for me to hit land. Comfortably will hit both of those things. Getting artifact in there can be reasonably easy because artifact creatures will count. But yeah, hitting an enchantment, hitting a planeswalker, hitting an instant, hitting a sorcery. Some decks will do it well. A lot of decks will struggle. I'm interested to see. I think there's a home for it in a mill specific sort of deck. Maybe my Barbala Saga deck, honestly, is quite good at sacking artifacts and enchantments.
And that is specifically designed to have lots of different card types in it. So that actually is a good home for it.
But it's interesting, even there, I'd rather have Mortality Spear because I'm gaining life a lot more consistently than I'm reaching Delirium and having 4 card types in graveyard.
That's true, but if you're looking for extra removal, it could be an additional add.
And I think for 4 mana, like it's okay. It's an okay amount of mana to pay to destroy any non-land permanent.
The other thing that I really like about this design space, this looks like an Assassin's Trophy to me.
Yes.
It's like Assassin's Trophy with steps, effectively. I just like how the R&D team, instead of making a new version of Abrupt Decay that's almost better than Abrupt Decay immediately, they've opted for like a way to reprint stuff with steps to give you a challenge to do. So they're not just reprinting the best of the best card.
It's the opposite of power creep, right? It's like it can be power creep if you meet criteria. So it's like, power creep with steps, which I think is better, I agree, than just having like, Abrupt Decay, but now it can hit everything. That's a boring card that makes Abrupt Decay, meaningless now. That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, relatively big news topic for Commander because there is a new rules committee in town.
Ooh.
Not for casual, but for cEDH.
Yes.
So look, we've already been on public record on this podcast multiple times saying that cEDH is not its own format. It's a mindset and a metagame of Commander. It's just one of the many metagames of Commander, right? There's many ways to play this very casually, very powerfully, and then very powerfully in cEDH. But not all people share this view. A new Twitter account just made an appearance on the scene at cEDH_RC, and on the 4th of September, they tweeted, formally announcing the cEDH Rules Committee, or cEDH-RC for short. Real creative, guys. We know you have some questions, so let's go through them. Who, why, how, when, a thread 1 of 7. And the thread goes on to explain that this is a way that a group of cEDH players, group of tournament cEDH players, are going to try and keep the tournament cEDH metagame, quote, fresh and exciting, made up with a team of some notable names, including the Top Deck founder, co-founder, and tournament organizer, Mikey Hollowhan, and Matthew from the YouTube channel Lee Mora's Cards. They also highlight how they're going to accomplish their goals, and that's with a new ban list. I do also want to highlight that they did write a more in-depth rationale, or a plan, if you would, on their website, which we've linked in the show notes. You can go read yourself in full. There might be more on that website by the time this video comes out. So it turns out there was more on that website by the time this video comes out. In the time it took us to record this and for me to edit it, they've disbanded the whole project. They've just kind of let it go. They've announced it on their Twitter. They've announced it on their website. So look, view the rest of this discussion as more of a general conversation of how they went about this and how in the future we should be more wary of this kind of thing. I think the conversation is still evergreen. I mean, cEDH is an ever-growing way to play Commander, and whether it needs an RC is still a question yet to be answered. So engage with this conversation, because I think there's still a lot of relevant points made in this video and still a lot of relevant conversations yet to happen in the cEDH and wider EDH community. Anyway, back to Walt and James from the past. But yes, there is a lot to unpack here. A brand new rules committee, potentially a brand new ban list, which means effectively a new format called cEDH, or called tournament cEDH.
It's a brand new thing. It's certainly not something that any of us saw coming, I don't think. Like, there was no whisper that there was someone putting together a cEDH rules committee on their own.
I would also argue there wasn't really a call for it.
Yeah, that's also reasonable.
Look, there's a lot to unpack here, and the first big thing is a separate ban list is going to make tournaments a nightmare, because there'll either be tournaments running with this new cEDH rules committee and running with their new ban list, but there'll be other tournaments that won't, which means one of your cEDH decks will be able to be played in one tournament, but you'll have to edit it and make a whole new deck, even in some cases, depending on how extreme their bans get, to have it playable in a different cEDH tournament. And this is a big problem. They actually state on their website, for now, think of this simply as a rule zero for competitive focused play that tournament organizers are encouraged to adopt for their events. Now, let's be clear. We aspire to work with the RC, the actual Commander Rules Committee, to evolve their philosophy to be more friendly towards cEDH, and will make every effort to do so. That will take time. In the meantime, the RC has made it very clear that this needs to come from within the community, and so we're doing just that. Now, this is very likely in response to a tweet made by Rules Committee member Jim LePage,
who is an avid cEDH player and follower and member of the scene. The Spike feeders exist for a reason.
I want to make a point here is we already have Jim on the Rules Committee as a voice for cEDH. There have been, I know people on that Twitter thread were pointing out things like Flash was banned because of cEDH, for example. So the Rules Committee in the past have made bans to accommodate cEDH and to keep cEDH in check. However, I think now the growth of cEDH, explosion in popularity, people moving even away from casual entirely to play cEDH, has made it so that people think that it needs to be its own sanctioned format. But look, I have a very strong opinion on this. I don't believe this is the right move. I think that cEDH already self-regulates, and the tournament scene is already complex enough that it's already fresh and interesting. It's pretty diverse. I might be a bit biased because Australia has a very diverse cEDH meta. America is a little bit different. But I think making an extra ban list is just going to make the whole scenario a bit... I think people will probably just look at it and be a bit TLDR, too hard basket. I don't want to play cEDH if I have to understand two separate ban lists or two separate metas.
I can see a world where, I don't know, I just feel so strongly that cEDH should cascade down into casual. There should be, there is obviously cEDH, the most optimized, the best decks that can be played, but then there is fringe cEDH, there is high-powered Commander. Like, I enjoy that there is actually a spectrum of experience when you play Commander, all the way from hyper-casual, just bought a precon, to I'm playing, Time Twister. Like, I'm glad that that's a thing that happens in Commander, and I don't enjoy the idea of having... I just think it becomes another Legacy or another Vintage that happens to be 4-player, and I think we have those formats for that. We have Australian Highlander, we have Canadian Highlander. Like, there are ways to play with these really strong cards that are not Commander, and I think that Commander should stay its own entire thing.
Play to Win recently on their YouTube channel said that they don't think there needs to be an additional ban list for cEDH. It's still Commander at the end of the day. It's just a different way of playing. Now, I will point out, tournament cEDH is a very different thing, and I'll give credit to one of our listeners and one of my good friends and cEDH rivals, Ben, who said that if a rules committee that was designed for cEDH to manage the structure and the guidelines of tournament play.
Like sort of like a tournament RC, specifically.
Specifically, not for banning cards, not for a ban list.
Not for the format Commander or the format cEDH, but for tournament cEDH.
So talking specifically about how long standard round timers should be in tournaments, or creating guidelines for things like judging things like are very exclusive to cEDH, like priority bullying, or judging things like, seat positions and what are a draw points awarded for, how much is a win worth, how much is a loss worth, how does the top 10 bracket work, how does a top 16 bracket work, because there are some brackets where top 10 means the top 2 players with points go straight to the finals, and then the bottom 8 have to fight out for the last 2 seats. That I would actually be on board with, because every tournament right now is vastly different.
Everyone's you get 80-minute round timers, 90-minute round timers,
75-minute round timers.
There's all sorts of different things that are being done. And basically everything you just described, there is a tournament doing it differently to somebody else. And it is confusing, right? When you're going to play a tournament and you go, okay, maybe my deck with these 5 or 10 stacks pieces in it isn't going to work if the round time is 75. But this other tournament in a month with 90-minute round timers, I might be able to win that.
I might be able to get away with playing more stacks and slowing the game down or something like that.
That's a weird thing, and that does actually fragment the metagame.
I just think a ban list of cards is not the way to keep the tournament scene in check. It's just going to confuse things, and it's going to muddy the waters so much that I think it's actually going to be a barrier to entry for new people playing cEDH. This might be a little bit of a segue into our next point of discussion here. It's kind of gatekeeping cEDH, in my opinion. You would have to be very involved in cEDH to be aware of this news. Firstly, if you're a casual viewer watching this might be the first time you've heard about this. It's a very big world, but it's not on a pedestal in the same way that Jim LePage from the RC, the actual rules committee, is. Do you know what I mean? It's not quite there yet, and I think just randomly logging onto Twitter and seeing a post that formally announcing a Commander cEDH rules committee, I was like, okay, this is going to change things.
It's a very weird thing to do without sort of asking anybody, I'm going to say. And it does tie us really nicely to the next point, which is my biggest and probably only really strong gripe with this, which is the lack of diversity in the committee that they have. There are no women, there are no people of marginalized genders. Well, I'm not actually sure about the racial makeup of the team, but I think they're all American. But most of them, I believe, I did read a thread. I'm not going to stand by this. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that most of the committee was appointed by one person, and they were just people that person knew, and that the remaining 7th person was actually voted upon by the people that were in at the time. I don't think, like, if you're going to start any format, I don't think the way to do it is go, what if me and my mates just did something? I think the way to do it is go, okay, like, community of people playing this game and engaging in this format, what would a format rules committee look like to you? Who would you say absolutely must be on there? How would you feel about racial and sexual equity on that in terms of the breakdown of the people who are on that diversity of that panel? You don't just go, we're the rules committee now, me and my 5 mates. You ask people, and you absolutely, like in 2024, I'm sorry, there is no group of people anywhere who should be governed by only men. Nowhere should that be done. It's just appalling, and like you can't get past that, I don't think.
Now, just to be very clear, we're not trying to start drama with this rules committee at all. If they want to try and pursue this, they look like they are reaching out for more members of their rules committee, and they might be looking specifically to diversify their panel of committee members. However, we're just trying to share our opinions on what we would have done in this situation, and it's probably not what they did here. Now, I also wanted to point out that the rules committee are going to be kind of asking for community feedback. They are asking for feedback, so let's give it to them. Let's say what we think. If you're a cEDH player, engage with this conversation. But I do want to put a big caveat. I might even put it in big letters over our faces. Be nice online, please. Look, we just love Commander, whether it's cEDH Commander, whether it's casual Commander, whether it's precons. And you know what else we love? Commander players. All shapes and sizes, genders, races, diversity. This game is one of the most diverse ways to play a trading card game or just any game in general. And that's largely because of the diverse player base. So let's keep it that way and be nice to each other and just love each other. It's that simple.
Okay, next thing is the Silver Bordered Project. So on the 14th of August, Jim Lepage, we already talked about this episode.
He's come up a lot just recently.
Yeah, great guy. We like Jim. Published an article via the Commander Rules Committee's official page, outlining a project that him and the rest of the RC are working on to assist Commander players, specifically in navigating the world of silver-bordered cards in Commander, basically. Silver-bordered cards in Commander. To be clear, at the gate, he quotes this project will not change the legality of any cards with silver borders or acorn-shaped security stamps. So,
Panic over,
not
everybody.
what's going on.
Panic over.
They're not unbanning any of the silver-bordered cards. That's not the purpose of the thing. So let's look into what he actually said that they're working on. Jim said, when we're done, we'll have classified all of the silver-bordered and acorn-stamped cards into one of 3 categories. 1, these are fine. These are cards that could mechanically exist in Magic's existing rules framework and could be printed into a black-bordered set.
Like the cheese stands alone.
Sure, you
for
could
example.
have the cheese stands alone. It would work. 2, these could be fine if you're willing to play along. These are cards that aren't fully supported by Magic's rule set, but they are intuitive and otherwise non-problematic. In other words, a judge could look at it and go, based on my understanding of these 5 rules, I think it should play out like this, and you should be able to work that out. The third category is these are not okay. So these are cards that would probably be banned in Commander in a hypothetical world where all silver-bordered cards are legal. They represent negative play patterns and interactions that you generally shouldn't spring on unsuspecting opponents. A framework for if you were wanting to play silver-bordered cards in your Commander game, because keep in mind, they're not going to be legal, so this is already a rule 0. You've sat down with your pod, you've said, I want to play this squirrel card from the unset. This is a framework for you to approach playing with your pod. It's not saying you can't play certain cards or you can play certain cards. It's just saying, based on our understanding, these ones should be fine, these could be fine if you're willing to play along, and these are not okay.
Everything's staying as normal.
Yeah.
I wanted to specifically shout out Command Zone. Small YouTube channel, might not have heard of them. Rachel did a solo episode. Her brand new deck. Sorry, this is spoilers if you haven't seen it.
Sure.
It's a Nora and the Wary deck.
Okay.
The one that
she's
exiles.
made this before with stickers, I know.
Well, that's the thing that she's built. And she did a full deck tech around this. But she also went in on talking about acorn stamped cards that she's included in the deck.
Right.
And the reason why I wanted to point this out is because one of the best Commander, one of our favorite Commander players ever,
Absolutely.
is rule zeroing acorn stamped cards and silver bordered cards in her deck.
Absolutely. This is like one of the most famous Commander players probably in the world.
Yep.
And she's saying, I love playing acorn stamped cards. So it's a thing that happens and it's a thing that casual players do.
Yep. And I think that it's really timely that Jim and their rules committee are kind of approaching this, because with Mystery Booster 2 coming out, they're including cards that are from the Alchemy or Arena.
Yeah, the Alchemy cards, I think. So the cards have been printed specifically for the online game. Some of them are now being printed in paper with acorn stamps.
Such as Oracle of the Alpha. This card is stupid, and this is probably going to go into the third category. Evolve might go into the second category because it is playable. You can just proxy it, but when it enters, you conjure, basically create a card. So you make a token, write what the card that you're conjuring is, put it in the same sleeves as your deck, and now you can shuffle it into your deck.
So yeah, Oracle of the Alpha conjures the Power 9.
Power 9.
And shuffles it into your deck. So Time Walk, the Moxes,
Black
Ancestral
Lotus.
Recall.
Crazy.
These are now cards that exist in your decks. But yeah, some of them are getting Acorn treatment, so you will be able to play them in select formats, not Commander, again, because of the Acorn stamp. I think it's very interesting, and I think it's clever that they're doing cards that you could conceivably do in paper. So Oracle of the Alpha, for instance, it's not easy. You have to have extra sleeves and be able to proxy up the Power 9.
Yeah.
But you could do that and shuffle your deck, and it functions as a game. I would say don't expect them to do very much of this because there are so many alchemy cards that cannot be done in paper, like, Norn's Disassembly. 1 mana enchantment, you pay 1 and a white. I think you sacrifice a permanent, and
you sacrifice it, I think.
Oh, do you? Okay,
anyway, yeah.
You seek a historic permanent. So seek is you tutor something out of your deck at random. So you could technically do this in paper by pulling every historic permanent out of your deck, shuffling them, and then selecting one randomly.
You could. But it would be a nightmare to resolve.
It's not something I expect them to ever print into paper because they don't want to do that with people. And that's why these cards existed in the first place, right? They wanted to use the Arena client to its full potential by having things you could only feasibly do by having a computer do these things for you. Because, basically a lot of these things would be very easy to cheat as well,
yes,
right?
Yeah, 100%. There are ways that players would abuse this.
I mean, even the example that I just gave, the only way that you could do that historic permanent thing is by revealing every historic permanent in your deck. So
and that would also mean revealing the rest of your deck to prove that you haven't left some in the deck. So technically it's possible, but you would have to go through so many hoops to make this work.
And also at that point, you are actually functionally not doing the mechanic as it existed, right?
Commander games are long enough. I'm not revealing my entire deck.
I
get annoyed when you cast Guided Passage at the best of times.
That's actually Guided Passage is a reasonable comparison. So I think it's a good time for us to have more structure for Acorn stamped cards because, as you say, there's more of them coming.
I do want to shout out one specific card that's getting reprinted in paper, which is Rusko Clockmaker, because this is a legendary creature. Commander players might want to play this as their commander. So for 2 blue and a black, you get a Human Artificer 3/3 that says when it enters, conjure a card named Midnight Clock. So this is the card that gets an hour time counter. An hour counter, then once you get all 12, you shuffle it and you wheel. It's a draw deck. But then it says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an hour counter on each permanent you control called Midnight Clock. Each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. That feels to me like a very reasonable commander to rule 0.
Yeah.
Like it feels possible. You could even buy multiple copies of Midnight Clock, or you could get some really cool altars made. That would be really cool.
Just recently in Bloomburrow, we saw a card that I'm absolutely playing in one of my decks called Murmuration. In your end step, for each spell you've cast this turn, I think, you create a 1/2 blue bird called Stormcrow.
Stormcrow, I have seen this.
And then it gives birds you control +1/+1. I'm playing that card in my deck, and I've taken the opportunity to absolutely buy some copies of Stormcrow, because why not, right? Like an excuse to play Stormcrow.
Well, it's like Llanowar Mentor. I used to use copies of Llanowar Elves as the tokens that Llanowar Mentor makes. It's just funny.
It doesn't have the word token on there, so it's not like exactly how it should play out. But like if you put it in a different colored sleeve, people know what you're doing. And so people could play this, buy 10 copies of Midnight Clock, and be like, guys, if they're in this sleeve, it's not a real one.
Yeah. So and I think that's totally fine. And if
I'd be happy to play against that deck.
If you approached me with a Rusko deck, I'd be like, hell yeah, let's go. Yeah. Midnight Clock's fun. Look, the thing that I wanted to point out about this whole Silverboarded project is just how amazing our rules committee are. Like, our rules committee just care about us so much having fun. They kind of feel like our parents telling us as kids, like, everyone can have fun just as long as everyone's happy. Like, you can't have fun at the detriment of someone else. That's just bad playtime. You'll get a timeout for that. But everyone should have fun. Our rules committee at the moment are really doing a fantastic job. They're not changing anything. They're not damaging the format. They're just giving us helpful... It's a player aid, effectively. Yeah. They're just giving us tools to make our games better. And that's what our podcast is all about. So I'm 10 out of 10, all for this.
Absolutely. I think it's really helpful to have structures and guidelines to guide people in the way that they play Commander. It doesn't have to always be, here's a ban, here's here's an unban as a way of telling people how to play. It can be, we as the people who run this format feel that this is the way you should engage in the way that we play. I think it can only do good. If people don't want to do it, they just don't do it, and that's fine.
Thanks, Rules Committee.
Yeah.
All right, to the listeners, what do you think of Commander Rules Committees, plural? You can tell us your favorite picks from Duskmourn. Are there any other things that happened in the last month of Commander that you want added to the alerts to go to the monthly Meteor?
Almost about to end now, so you want to get in as fast as you feasibly can. But you can tell us everywhere at Get Commanded on all social platforms, or come talk in our Discord server. It's where me and James hang out, and there's a specific forum for the monthly Meteor.
Yeah, and watch us live playing actual factual Commander on Twitch at twitch.tv/getcommanded. That's the best place to hang out with us and tell us your opinions on everything Commander.
We'd like to thank our patrons as well over on Patreon. Fuzzy, Bottomless Potamus, Dyer, Dylan Norg, Bertie, Crazy Logic, and Benjamin. And an extra special shout out to Fletcher Cutting and Wizard Down Under, who support us in the Space Commander tier. You're the best.
You are the best. And they got to watch this whole thing with extra stuff. Yeah. Extra commentary, extra points, extra bloopers and outtakes.
Walt
all
coughing.
Of that. Yep.
If that's something that appeals to you, phlegm.
Yep. If you want that, Patreon. Also, thanks to Palms Off Gaming for sponsoring this podcast. You can check them out at palmsoffgaming.com.au/#getcommanded to get 10% off your purchase and support the show at the same time.
When you pick up Oracle of the Alpha and you're shuffling the Power 9 into your deck, make sure they're in really good sleeves so you don't damage
You don't
them.
want your Black Lotus to get damaged.
Keep it safe in a Palms Off Gaming sleeve.
Keep it safe.
That's all we have time for. We'll see you next Friday for another transmission from the Space Commanders, and next month for the return of the monthly Meteor.
Goodbye, Commander players.